This week's content presentation is about social perception, presented by Francisca Rogers for Psych 512. The way we are explain how we behave. The way others are explain how they behave. We are constantly observing each other to evaluate ourselves and others. Everything presented in front of our eyes influence our thoughts, feelings, actions, desires, and motives. This week's reading materials from Cassin, Fain, and Marcus talk about how we see ourselves and how we see others. Who are we? How do we end up with character traits we have now? Who exposed us to those traits? Why did we choose those traits instead of others? What are our goals in life? Why are those goals more important than other possible goals? Where and how do we see ourselves within our family circle? Within our social circle? Why do we believe certain things? Why is our attitude different toward different things? Why do we feel a certain feeling when we are around a certain person and when we're in a certain situation? These are some of the questions to answer who we are and what kind of person are we. When we sort of figuring out what kind of person we are, we then wonder, how valuable are we in our social circle? What do others think of us when they see us, appearance and behavior-wise? When they hear us, when they interact with us? Do they like us, approve us, or despise us? These are very important to us. We are, after all, social beings. As we wonder what others think of us, we in our mind, in turn, formulate what kind of person they are too. When we figure out what they are, or at least we believe what they are, we behave ourselves accordingly to gain their approval, to look good in front of them, to avoid being criticized. We often change ourselves upon finding out what others think of us. To change ourselves, we look for ideas and guidance. Hence, we look for others who are better or superior. Our goal is to upgrade ourselves by copying more desirable traits from others. Chaddy introduced us to theories explaining behaviors and more into social comparison. Every behavior, whether it's intentional or unintentional, has a cost. The cost has to do with judgment of behavior attributes, pragmatic goals, and information resources. Those came from what kind of person we are, which include our motivations, desires, and goals. As much as we compare ourselves to a better person, oftentimes we compare ourselves with others who are worse than us, especially when we are unable to successfully morph up. It made us feel better about ourselves, to cope with our failures, and give us some sense of hope that we are not that bad. Depending on what we're trying to achieve, we compare ourselves upward to self-improve or downward to self-validate. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages for each of them. We also try to make sense why others do certain things, whether the actions are direct or indirect. According to Hyder's theory in Chaddy's textbook, there is an external or internal factor that motivate behavior. Jones and David's theory said intentional action has a motive or reason, while Kelly's theory said an intentional one resulted from behavior, whether it's impulsive or automatic. We change ourselves usually for the better because of what someone said about us. We want to look good in front of others. Who wouldn't? The two articles show how feedback from others affect our perception about ourselves as well as goods and services we use in our daily lives. A simple feedback about your hair can send you rushing to a mirror or the nearest beauty salon. A feedback about your weight can send you to sign up with a personal trainer. Somehow we are more concerned with negative feedbacks. They usually generate immediate actions to fix them. As for positive feedbacks, we often just smile and brush them off. It goes the same way for goods and services we use. When we heard reviews on items that we know or use, our antennas went up to make an immediate decision. We value reputation. Nowadays, goods and services are represented by human reputation. When we see or hear a famous person represent a good or services, we automatically judge the person first, not the value of goods and services offered. For promotion of the goods, if we approve the person, we tend to give it a try or continue using it. If we do not approve the person, we scrunch our noses and might even disassociate ourselves from using it in the future. To dismiss the goods or services, if we approve the spokesperson, we might take into consideration his or her opinions on why the product is a failure. If we disapprove the person, we might even blame him or her for their inability to see the value of the product. Who am I? Our social self. Social self consists of three attributes: self-concept, self-esteem, and self-presentation. Self-concept. Many times, mostly during trainings or conferences, I was asked to describe myself. It is a difficult task for me, and I envy others who are at ease doing it, like they have flashcards prepared. It's not that I don't know what kind of person I am, but I was brought up with bragging about myself is not appropriate. Kasson's textbook went in depth about self-concept, on how we see ourselves, what we look like. When I attempt to apply it to myself, my culture, being Chinese Indonesian, seems to be the strongest attribute in shaping who I am, the way I think and the way I see things. Self-esteem. When people ask to describe themselves, the textbook said that they tend to self-enhance themselves, or better than average effect, and exhibit implicit egotism or implicit self-esteem. Summed up, they think that they are better than they really are. But when they are faced with failures, they are putting up defenses by self-handicapping themselves and exhibiting self-serving beliefs. It's not their fault, it's someone else's fault. Our self-esteem is how we feel about ourselves. Sadly enough, our society taught us that our self-esteem is as worthy as somebody else's opinion about us. It drives us to more and more into pleasing others to gain their approval, and oftentimes with negative approaches. The moment we step out of our house, we have to self-present ourselves, hence self-presentation. First and foremost is our appearance. Is our hair in place? Are our shoes or socks matched? Anything on our teeth? Then as we walk into our workplace, we have to be aware of our speech, body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, etc., so that we don't come across the wrong way. Not just that, we have to adjust all of the above based on the person we are interacting with, or they call it self-monitoring. The way we interact with our friends and our supervisors are different. If self-esteem is in regards of emotion, which is abstract, self-presentation is the concrete part, which is our actions and behaviors. Social perception. Others see us and form their opinions of us. We do the same thing. This process is called social perception, where we try to understand each other, especially to explain behaviors. There are so many sayings about first impressions, such as there is no second chance to make first impression or first impression counts. We form our first impression based on physical appearance, first and foremost, then we add the situation that the person is in, then how he or she behaves in that situation, verbal, using words and or tone of voice, or nonverbal, using facial expression and body language. Since first impression, well, actually every impression is important, we often deceive others and vice versa to cover up imperfection. Imperfections are like taboos. They are not to be shown or displayed or even known. How can we distinguish sincerity or truth and deception? The textbook mentioned fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, stutter, squirming, quivering of the voice, to name a few. But when we interact with others, we seek enjoyment of each other's company, not observing those traits hoping to catch a deception. The things we use and wear are also for the sake of social perception. When someone is wearing a brand name product, he or she wants to be perceived as someone that is financially secured. Many brands relied on celebrities to increase their value. If the celebrity is perceived favorably, the brand will succeed. But if the celebrity is an eyesore, it might backfire. We often buy those brands to also be associated with those celebrities. Social comparison. Human compares each other for various reasons. All those reasons lead back to self. We compare to check ourselves, that we are who we think we are by matching it with others' opinion. Another reason is to keep up with the Joneses. No one wants to lose, whether it's tangible like materials or intangible like pride. The other reason is to self-improve. Social comparison can be beneficial, like checking ourselves and wanting to improve ourselves for the better, but it can also be detrimental to constantly wanting to be superior, especially financially. I believe this is one of the reasons why many Americans are in credit card debts. To keep up requires a lot of money. Comparing self to others is observed from early age. Siblings eyeing each other toys, cookies, friends, etc. If it's not directed properly, it is going to be destructive. Culture shapes who we are. Culture makes us see the same object differently. Culture therefore makes us behave and think differently. Culture did not view males or females the same. It treats various races as either superior or inferior. Its language can provide numerous other meanings versus one meaning in ours. It stresses out on being a part of a whole instead of rising above the rest. A simple, unimportant gesture can be seen as a disrespect in different cultures. When interacting socially, we have to take account different cultures. Now that our world has become global, intercultural interaction is part of our daily lives. Technology seems to be becoming a part of our daily food. Everywhere we go, we see people submerged in their phones. Social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagrams are integrated into our daily lives. We must constantly check them. Can't miss a day. It's like taking multivitamins for our health. Technology has become one venue of interaction. The same as face-to-face, we want others to approve us in social media. We put pictures up in hope for positive feedback or approval. When we get negative feedback instead, we changed it with the goal to change the negative feedback into a positive one. We live and strive for those. Some even feel depressed if he or she didn't get those positive feedback on their Facebook account. Conclusion. Researchers in the reading materials come up with many theories to explain ourselves and our behaviors. Regardless, at the end of the day, everything we are, everything we say, everything we think, and everything we do, we have to lay them out before our Lord. It is Him that we need to answer to, not our social peers. Proverbs 25 verse 6 said, "Do not exalt yourself in the presence of the king, and do not stand in the place of the great." It speaks on humility and self-denial, where the topic of this week is pretty much the opposite. As Christians, how can we have healthy self-esteem but be humble, not looking down at people to feel better about ourselves? The next question is, how do we put this into practice as professionals in a cutthroat secular world? As I'm doing this presentation, I wonder what kind of tone of voice should I use? Should I have a professional voice or should I have my real voice? As a teacher, I have to present myself professionally. I have to put a face out there in front of my students and sometimes the parents as a person of authority and knowledgeable. My job requires me to prove my competence with numbers, which are the test scores. I have to constantly compete and compare myself with my colleagues. If my score is low, do I blame myself, even though I believe I put in my bestest, as my students say, effort? Or is it my students' fault for not paying attention or lacking support at home? If my score is high, can I act humble by not sneering at my colleagues who did not have high scores? After all, I want to be the bestest teacher.